Take control of your global business with the 7th edition FitSkills online program. The world's leading export-import training gives you the edge you need to compete in the international marketplace. Gain access to leading-edge tools and resources that will accelerate your career and business trajectory. Get real-world training designed by business for business to enhance your global credibility and expertise. Learn more and sign up to get your global business advantage.
So welcome back, everybody, to the Trade Squad. This is episode 2, and joining me again today are my co-hosts, Leah and Audrey.
Woo!
Yeah, so excited to have you back. We have had some amazing feedback from the first episode, so this one is going to be even better, and we're just going to get even better from here on out. I want to introduce our guest today, AJ Tjaden. He is joining us. He's a business and marketing consultant. Yeah, for supply chain. So give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to work with Nike China, doing some marketing and logistics for them for 4 years. And then I worked with BNSF Logistics down here in Dallas, doing international sales and business development with them, growing up there. And then I've done a few different projects here and there. And most recently, I've started working with Sarah on Let's Talk Supply Chain and just getting her name more out there on a global level and more... Let's put it more fun and more engaging with everyone.
Yeah, we want to bring the community together, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. So I'm super excited to have you on board, not only for this show, but for Let's Talk. And you're going to be a big promoter of this show. So appreciate you coming on today. So our first topic is about gender diversity. We might get into a little bit of mental health. We'll see where this whole discussion goes. And one of the reasons that this topic sort of came up is how AJ and I met. So are you okay with me telling you this story?
Absolutely, but I think we need to give a shout out to Tony Gordon, who introduced us. And he said amazing things about you, and that's just kind of where it went.
And Angie Reno. Angie Reno was a big part of that discussion.
She basically took my hand and was like, "You need to meet Sarah." I'm like, okay, sure.
So let me set the stage. We were at TPM back in March, and Angie and I were talking about gender diversity in supply chain and logistics. And she was like, "You need to meet AJ." And so we started talking, right? We talked a little bit about what I did, a little bit about what he did. And then he turned to me and said, "You know, we really need to do something for young professionals in this industry." And I was like, "Okay, what's your idea?" And he was like, "A booze cruise." And I was like, "What?"
Yes.
And I was like, okay. Not sure how many women you're going to get on that. And that's, we want to make sure this is like gender equal. We're getting sort of out of the traditional thinking. So you and I had, without going into it, you and I had a pretty good upbeat conversation about it. We went Lakers tickets, right? We thought maybe...
No, you wanted a Lakers suite. That's what I remember. You're like, let's get a Lakers suite.
Yes,
you know enough people. I'm like, okay.
But I also don't know if that would be good for everybody. So anyways, we really didn't finish off the discussion. We just sort of had some fun with it. But I think that leads us into our first topic, is about the next generation. How do we get away from traditional thinking? How do we think more about excursions or team, what we're going to do as professionals in the industry to get together that's away from that traditional thinking, more forward thinking, and that's going to encompass everybody. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Anybody?
I guess I can start with the whole, we need to get more young people in the supply chain. And that came from my boss, Brian Gengen at BNSF Logistics, now with Trade Tech, where I remember my first event at TPM 2 years ago. It was me and then Devin, and we were probably the youngest people there. We probably still are. And everyone, they're not old, but they're,
Be careful.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
They're more mature, but everyone kind of knows enough people. And I found out that being so young, like, it's a great networking tool, but there wasn't enough young professionals in the supply chain industry. And Devin and I have been talking about this, and Brian, and he said, you should start something where it's a happy hour or something, because everyone does that at a TPM. Everyone does, hey, we have an open bar at this event. And I think I sent Sarah a bunch of lists of like, hey, this is where everyone's going, and you network with people there. But how do you get away from it? Do you do a dinner? Do you do a lunch? Do you do a booze cruise? Because right next to the event, you can rent a boat. There was one event that was on a boat, and that's something, you did the harbor cruise. I think you went on it, Sarah.
I did, yeah.
But I'm tailoring it to my audience. What does everyone love? They love an open bar. Okay.
But also, I'm going to throw this out there. When we're looking at the next generation, we're also looking at a bigger number of women within that mix of people. So traditionally, yes, booze cruises and open bars and all you can drink, I think traditionally has sort of been that male focused. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right.
But so what do you guys think, Leah, Audrey?
If I can jump in too, it's culturally, I mean, it's culturally something maybe North Americans do or maybe Europeans do. But I work with a lot of Muslims, and they're not out drinking. So then how, when you are a company that's going global, or when you're at, major conferences, how are you incorporating, people who have very different cultures than your own, or than the kind of traditional. So even at TPM, it's in Long Beach. That's California. It's fun. It's North American. Fine. But then if you have people coming from overseas, Asian, Indian, Muslim, they may not be into that whole thing. So you're losing that whole section of people, not just women, but just everyone with that different culture.
I know Leah wants to jump in here.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there's a conference that's on international trade called Get Global that Long Beach is hosting this November. And I helped to facilitate bringing the city and the port and all of the different supporters around this conference to really make it sort of a capstone event for the city. The founder, Julian Leuthold, is probably, I don't know his exact age, I'm going to say early 30s, but he comes from an event and music background, and he, is involved in house music and all of that. And so he put this idea out to sort of imagine, if you will, the port commissioners and the city officials, and said this should be like South by Southwest. This should be, a big event where we have like music and stuff the day before or after, so people can really network and get to know each other. Yeah. And I like to think that, of course, I'm incredibly cool with everything. But even I was like, what? Is that possible that we can blend all of this? But I thought it was a great suggestion. So maybe stuff like that is the new way to network and connect people.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here. Sorry, go ahead, Audrey.
Inbound Boston's big conference in Boston, and it's tech. And it's a lot of tech people. I think there were 19,000 people there. And one of the things they did was they brought in food trucks for lunch. So it was part of your package. You'd go out, and you were kind of on a lawn. There were swings. And another thing they did was set up a specific hashtag called Inbound Solo, so that if you were visiting the city and you didn't know anyone, if you were using that hashtag, you could set up meetups. So, okay, meet at the swings at 11:45. Anyone inbound solo, and then kind of start to connect that way. And it was more over a lunch.
Yes.
And out on the lawn, outside, it's good weather. So.
You and I are on the same pages about this, because I don't know if anybody saw any of the posts about transparency. FreightWaves just hosted the conference Transparency. And I believe they took the same kind of route. I'm not sure if they went that far, but as far as supply chain conferences go, from what I could see, I didn't go, but from what I could see, they really brought in, that tech vibe from the tech side of things, and how Inbound does their conferences to really, they brought in Gary Vee. I think Gary Vee was one of their big speakers, or the keynote or something like that. I mean, I like Gary Vee, and I think those are the types of things, on a solo level, trying to figure this out. I think that it's a bigger and a broader topic where we all need to come together, and we all need to encourage our supply chain conferences to really take a look outside of the industry and say, hey, this is what these guys are doing. This is how they're attracting new professionals to their industry. This is how they're keeping them engaged. And it's not just about the next generation. Like in inbound, if you were any generation, you would have loved it because it's new, it's fun, it's exciting. There's certain aspects of the conference for certain sectors.
Yes.
Right? Which makes so much sense, but it completely blows the mind of what we're currently doing for supply chain conferences and how we're going to get young professionals in this industry.
I think the biggest, I agree with you on that. And you brought up, we're not having enough young people coming to the conferences. And the end part, TPM is a great example. It's so expensive.
Well, okay.
So that's the biggest thing where like my boss, Brian, at my first TPM, he's like, he's going to come and we're going to share a room. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's great. And then I looked at hotel prices at the Renaissance right up the street. They were going for $1,500 a night. So what company is going to pay for that? Now you'll send your best executives, you'll send your best people there, but it's so expensive. That's how people don't go into the conference at TPM. They sit in the Hyatt lobby to talk to people. And then, you have your per diem, and then you have flights and everything. But I think that's where if you bring a young person, say, hey, you can come for 2 days. That's really what TPM is. It's a 2-day event, but people stretch it out to 4 days because you have clients that you want to meet and everything. But if you just take like a mentor and say, hey, can I tag along for this trip? Because it's a great experience. It's a phenomenal networking event.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, yes, like a happy hour is a great icebreaker, but what else could you do? I'd love to have like Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, the containers are outside, but what if they did like a happy hour on the vessel?
Yeah.
Now I know it's not possible.
That might not be compliant worthy.
Yeah, I was saying, I'm noticing a theme here with AJ. There's a lot of boats and alcohol.
Okay, but here's the thing: you break the ice. You don't just because you go to a happy hour doesn't mean you have to drink. And to your point, Leah, with you have a lot of people that are Indian and Hindu and Muslim and they don't drink. Yeah. My boss this past year, Namesh Modi, he's Hindu. He doesn't drink, but he was at every happy hour not drinking.
Yeah.
And there were events that
I'm going to jump in here because I think you brought up a good point, because it's not only about the conference creators.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about the C-suite and the mentors in supply chain, giving the young professionals that opportunity to go to these conferences. And maybe it's, responsibility of both, because the conference people could actually make it a lot easier for young professionals to go, right? I don't know if it's, a reduced ticket price or having them submit a video or something to say why they really want to come to TPM.
Or even if we did a panel, like
we
at
could do a
the
panel
conference,
of young professionals. Absolutely.
And have, that'd be something. But I think it starts with the mentality of the mentors, the bosses, to say, hey, I want to take this young person, because give it 10 years, everyone that was at TPM, they'll either be retired or they'll be retired because they won't be dead because they're not that old. But I'm sorry. But no, it's really something where it's the mindset of
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah.
No, but to put a spin on that, it is nice, you get a lot of top down. So if you have a lot of experienced executives kind of talking down to you, or flip it to have a panel that is currently in that kind of mid or learning stage where it's a different perspective, and they can even give you, you can give like what we're doing is I'm not the executive. I'm not the, a super expert. I know everything and I'm at the end of my career. I'm in it. This is what I'm experiencing. These are the hurdles that I'm having. These are the resources that I go to. So I'm sharing it from I'm in the trenches at this moment kind of experience. And that's certainly valuable for everyone. It's important for executive and C-suite to see what my experience is, because it's likely different from what theirs is. And then it's important for people coming up or people at the same level to see, your peer-to-peer kind of kind of panel or experience too. So
yeah. So
I
not
agree with
only
AJ. Yeah.
not only do we want to make conferences more fun, right? I think that's the part of the consensus here.
Yeah.
We need to make it more available to the next generation. Not even just fun, but just a little bit more, I think, congruent with
Accessible.
well, we wanted to make it more accessible. We want it to be a lot more fun and engaging, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, so if anybody is watching that puts on supply chain conferences, I hope that we gave you a lot of
Like
great
Mark,
ideas.
Eric.
Make a supply chain for millennials conference somewhere, but not, somewhere like Chicago or Dallas, or just somewhere that it's going to be fun, by like a South by Southwest in Austin, where everyone loves going to.
Yeah.
And make it where, again, I'm going to throw out the happy hour deal, but just because no, hold on. Just because with happy hour doesn't mean you have to drink. Like,
No.
one reason.
Everybody loves
No.
snacks.
Yes.
Everyone loves snacks.
Food. The food
Yeah.
gets you
Do an
there.
ice cream bar. Everybody loves a Sundae bar.
Yes. Or a poutine bar, because we're Canadian, right, Audrey?
Bars. Yeah.
Oh,
Just
God.
saying.
But that's how I met my boss at Nike. It was a nightclub at 2 a.m. and I had one drink all night because I'm dead serious. And we just started talking, and I gave him my business card, and he's like, okay, come to my hotel tomorrow. I'll show you what I do.
And segue into gender policy. 2 a.m. at the bar, and please come to my hotel later for a meeting.
Yes. All
No,
right.
it's not your fault, AJ. I'm just saying, like, that's just an interesting segue.
Yes.
It was in China. Like,
Because yeah, we definitely need some of that policy in place, especially, not only for men, I think, being in the workplace with everything that's going on a diversity scale, with the Me Too movement, that kind of thing. We need to protect both sides. And
Absolutely.
as a female that used to be in sales, I can tell you the amount of times that I have been in, different situations that have not turned out badly, thank goodness, but really had the chance to, and they could have. And I think that it's the responsibility of the company to set boundaries and rules as to when and where you can meet with customers. I'm just going to throw that out there.
I agree. Or, I'd always have a mentality of, if I had a drink with a female or something, I'd invite a coworker with me. So that way it's not just one-on-one, and they could be a part of the deal, or they could be a friend. So that way no one feels, no one knows who the third wheel is per se, or who's there, but it's just a group of people, and you never go by yourself. And that's my thought process, because our intention is never to make anyone feel uncomfortable. And I think it goes both ways. Yeah. So how can we break down that barrier? Is it involving someone else? Is it going to, a public place, even the hotel lobby for a drink? Here I am back on the drinking.
No, but okay, let's face it. Sales and our industry, or industries as a whole, are relationship driven, and they're very social. That's how you get business done these days. And I think we were going to bring up the topic of drinks on the golf course. I think that's one thing that's kind of, very male driven. But at the end of the day, I think it's social in general, whether you're on the golf course, whether you're at a conference, I think it's just a social thing. So the drinking thing, I think, just sort of comes with it. But again, there needs to be rules and boundaries, I think, to protect each part.
I agree.
Well,
Go, Leah. No, go ahead, Audrey.
Yeah, I mean, moving away from the non-traditional, right? Like, it's so easy you have the hotel room. It seems like an easy space, but it's like making that extra effort to book a space in the hotel, or pick a neutral place outside. So it's just right now it's like, oh, it's this extra step, it's this extra research, but it's getting that, into the practice of that, and then making it seamless as to, of course we would meet at Starbucks. Of course we would meet at, in the hotel conference room. Of course there would be 4 of us and not 1-on-1. So it's getting in that mindset. And it's always, in sales, it's about being cognizant of the other, or what the value is. If you're, working with someone who loves golf, by all means, don't, skip golf, but it is, if you're relationship building, it is trying to be cognizant of of what the other person's potential interest is or where you could have common ground. And it may not be the kind of traditional thing that it used to be.
Yeah, and it's thinking outside the box, right? Sorry, Leah, go ahead.
No, I was just, playing devil's advocate a bit. I was reading an article the other day that made the claim that if the onus is on the company to sort of not police behaviors, but set policies in place that are meant to be, help to oversee certain behaviors and protect people in their workforce. But if the perception is that adds an extra layer of cost or of due diligence or other things, does that now become a detriment, especially for women in particular, if we're seen being the reason behind new policy that other people may see as problematic? I like that Audrey's saying it's a mindset shift, because I think that's exactly what it is. And I think this is something we're all going to have to get to eventually, just like making conferences fun is a mindset shift.
Yes, it is.
But to play devil's advocate, how much of that is a potential reality? Because I know for myself, I've been in situations where you try to go with the flow and be part of the group, and it doesn't necessarily align with what you'd like to actually see happen in a work environment. So it's a tough one.
And it's true. You don't want to be the difficult woman or the difficult, different culture person. And then it's you're the standout and you're the reason. It's like, no, we all together have to change our behavior to just be inclusive. So it's not, I'm being inclusive because you're difficult. I'm being inclusive because we all want to be inclusive and share and be friends and, do business together. And this is how
I think it's on all of us to look out for other people. And I don't understand the mindset of, it is my hotel room. I'm sorry, I don't want anyone else coming to my hotel room just because I'm a messy person. And I don't. but that's just me. I don't understand why. You have your own room for a reason.
Yeah.
And yes, I understand meetings go late at night and everything, but still, that's where it's like, hey, can I pay for your Uber home? That way you get home safely and I go my separate way. Mm-hmm. Everyone's like, oh, let's, we can share. It's like, no. You go your way, I go my way. But it's the mindset. It's holding each other accountable and saying, hey, that wasn't right of what you're doing. Or can I invite if Sarah and I are having a drink and say, hey, Sarah, can I invite my friend, Audrey to this? And that way it's a lot easier for everyone, per se. That's where I think it's just talking with people and saying, hey, can I invite someone else? Because then you're networking as well.
Yes, I was just going to say, you get to network and meet more people, which is amazing. Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. I love that a lot. Okay, so I guess, we sort of touched on a few different points too when it comes to mental health, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of what happens and the discussions that we're having in diversity also cross over into that mental health side of things. People feeling comfortable bringing these things up, talking about how they feel or what they like, what they don't like, or being perceived as difficult, right? Being judged for that, being judged for your gender. And I think that, and I only bring that up real quick because I think that in diversity conversations, the mental health piece is really important, but it doesn't get mentioned enough. I don't believe. So I just wanted to sort of throw that out there. Before we go on to the next topic, did we want to just touch on equal pay?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm for it. I'm absolutely for it. We're just taking a poll.
Audrey?
Yeah, it's beyond overdue that people have equal pay. And it's, there's so many resources and data out there proving, what the difference is in, what kinds of labor there are, emotional labor, physical labor, mental labor. It's long overdue. And I think some of the solution is to have that transparency around what people's incomes are. Or if for a company, especially it's tricky for entrepreneurs or small startups, but having set guidelines as to if I achieve X, Y, and Z, I could expect to have a pay increase, as opposed to making it vague and personality and who I like. If you put those targets in place, which I'm sure more bigger corporations are able to do, if you set that from the beginning, there's no hurt feelings, it's transparent, everybody knows what they need to do, and then it helps you as management also address, inequalities where you're like, oh, wait a second, that person's kind of getting ahead of maybe where the milestones are and maybe the touch points. So
yeah,
there's
because
lots of ways to do it. So let's get it done.
I was going to ask you, like, where do we even start? How do we do that? Is that a mindset shift as well, which I think it is. But like you said, like you just gave great tools for somebody to use for us to get there.
I was just going to say Audrey for office, number one. But actually, too, it's a great tie back to mental health, because I think if you're in the workforce and you don't feel that you're as valued in terms of your contribution because of pay equity, that's one piece of it. And then I also think about how many households where one of the adults in that household has to take on the burden of maybe additional hours or a side job because their partner isn't being paid equally. And if there was that equity from a pay standpoint, especially when you have kids and all the other responsibilities that people might have in a household, think from a mental health standpoint what that would really do for people.
Absolutely. AJ, I know you're jumping to get in here.
Well, so in the last couple of years, we're reading all these different articles, and as a man in business, we don't think about that pay gap. And you're reading all these articles and you're hearing all these stories, and we're getting more familiar and we're educating ourselves of, correct me if I'm wrong, it's for every $1 the man makes, the woman makes, is it 78 cents or 70
something.
I thought we got to 82 cents at one point. Maybe it
depends though. It depends. White women might be making 80 cents, but in the US, African American or Hispanic are making like 40.
What?
40 50 per dollar. Yeah.
I believe that. And I think the biggest thing with mental health is know your worth. And I've told that to people of, don't settle for less if you know that you're getting, and it's just being confident in yourself, because we all negotiate, what am I worth? What is my time worth? And some people might be, way high. And a lot of people are going to be low because they're too afraid of that rejection of saying, hey, I'm worth 60,000. And the company says, we can offer you 48. Well, I think business 101 ethic is never take the first offer, regardless of how good it seems. Always, you can always do some wiggle room of, can we go to 55 and give me an extra week of vacation? Just something where you can work with them, but don't settle for less. And I think that's for both sides, but primarily for women in business, because you guys work hard. There's so much more that you guys can offer, but as we all have said on this, it's, especially in supply chain, it's a very heavily male-dominated field, but it also starts with the mindset, and it's talking with people face to face and having an honest conversation with everyone. I don't think we get that enough in 2018 and now in 2019, where everyone goes to social media and posts about all this, and it's like, can we just have an honest conversation, like between two people, and not be connected on our phone or post something on Facebook that this is how I feel, and when you see the person tomorrow, it's like, whatever.
Or be respected for asking for more.
And absolutely.
Being able to have that, like being respected for me to go in for a $70,000, let's say, and they want to be at 60 or 65, but being respected for at least asking for it. And then having the respect of getting that negotiation, to really know your value. And I think, that's also the mental health side, right? Is knowing your value when you go in, making sure to say, listen, this is what I can bring to the table. This is what I'm going to do for you. And these are the goals and the things that I want to hit in the next 6 to 12 months working for your company. So this is why you need me, why you want me, and this is why I think I'm worth this much. But having the confidence to do it.
And that's the overarching theme, though, is that this is the work that I do, and these are the skills or experience that I bring to the table. Whereas I think for a lot of people, it's like, oh, they're not at their desk that much. Their kid is sick all the time. They have to leave early for daycare. Then you're when you're monitoring people sitting at their desks, or you're monitoring people who are doing work. And some people need a bit more of a flexible schedule, work from home. you know, and it's moving away from that 1950s. We decided that we work from 9 to 5, and we decided that we take lunch from 12 to 1. And it's moving towards, you know, this is management understanding. This is the work that needs to get done. These are the customers that the person is interacting with. These are the factories that need to be managed. This is our process of work. And then if they're getting it done, who cares if they're leaving at 4:30, you know? And it's that, you know, if you have 10 hours in a day to do something, it's going to take you 10 hours in a day. If you can do it in 4, you're going to do it in 4, you know? So it's having an understanding of the work in the process, and then not judging people based on kind of the 1958, you know, work model, which, you know, favored white men in the office, right? When you move away from that model, you know, non-traditional industries, women, people of color, everyone does better the sooner we can move away from that kind of 1958 social construct model or work construct model.
Yeah, and I think maybe on a future episode we should talk about working remotely, because that is a big one, and I don't think we're going to get to it today. So I'm going to end it on that note, because I think, you know, Audrey tied that up really well for us. And I'm going to turn it over to you, because we want to talk about Hyperloop.
We want to talk about Hyperloop. We do want to talk about Hyperloop because it is the next big thing. And if people really get on board with it, it could completely change the way we move goods and we move people. So it's a very exciting kind of future, you know, future thing, but hopefully near future. So if you're not familiar with what Hyperloop is, it's tubes that move by magnetic levitation, but they are confined to a tube, so they're not kind of out, you know, impacting traffic or regular traffic flows, or and they can be done over top of current rail lines. They can be done over top of current highways. So they're really not, you know, a huge inconvenience or hurdle to getting them set up.
And also inexpensive, safer than cars, faster than trains, and less damaging to the environment.
Yes.
Huge, all really huge and key components to supply chain right now.
Yeah.
So I'm for it, Audrey. My question is, again, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate, because I love the Hyperloop, because then you can get from like New York to London in like an hour or two, something like that, which I would love to. But then you take away jobs from humans. And I know we're going into the technology side of you lose jobs and everything. But what about like the unions? How would they feel about it? I'm just kind of curious with
That's a good
your
question.
thoughts on that.
It's a good question.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the realities, at least in the U.S. government, of lobbying and special interests. I totally agree with you, AJ. And it's not to say that disruption still won't happen. I mean, look at Uber, despite the taxi drivers union and a lot of the disruption that took place there. Is it a perfect system? No, but I definitely think, you know, California and the work that was being done on the Hyperloop out here through a federal grant got a lot of pushback. I mean, yeah, there's just special interest that, despite the fact that this would be great, has their bottom line in mind. So it's an interesting conundrum.
Can I share?
It's weird because
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious, you know, let's say you're Hyperlooping goods. Are they still the drivers? Could they get jobs working for the Hyperloop, of whether it's the safety of taking it on and taking it off, or even look at the Port of Long Beach. They have an 100% automated port, but all they do is sit in a chair and work 20 hours, and they get paid $300,000 because they're unionized, and they just make sure the screens are all working. Is that the same of what truck drivers or pilots are going to do? No, this is a real.
It's a good one.
I want the job.
It's a good question.
I want that job.
Yeah.
I'm just going to share a few stats with you, because I think that it's important. So the Hyperloop can move at 1,000 kilometers per hour. So as far as supply chain, and I know goods, that kind of speeds it opens up opportunities, and it reduces demands on roads.
Yeah.
So the driver shortage that we're having on the trucking side, it's going to alleviate some of that capacity. The other thing to
You're
consider
right.
is that at the U.S. busiest seaports, trucks burn 68 million gallons of fuel annually just to get containers from the port to I guess the rail or maybe the warehouse or anything like that. So the Hyperloop is actually they would take a 40-foot container, drop it into a pod, and it would move at 700 miles per hour to the next destination. And you wouldn't need that kind of fuel to burn to be able to move a 40-foot container.
So as a Californian, I went to a meeting yesterday. I went to a meeting yesterday in Beverly Hills from Long Beach. It's about a 30-mile drive. Should take me 30 minutes technically.
Yeah, but it's Los Angeles, so
it took me 2 hours. It took me 2 hours to get there because of traffic. And what I think is really interesting and what I think the ultimate pressure points will be on this issue that will move this forward despite special interest and even the concern around jobs, et cetera, is the pain point that the industry is receiving right now based on customer expectations. People want their goods within a shorter and shorter period of time. Yes, and, you know, if you're stuck on the 405 alongside me and your pickup or whatever, you know, vehicle you were using to deliver yesterday, you were not going to get there on time.
No. That is a great point. But
why haven't Amazon came up with Hyperloop already? That's what I want to know. They're the first in tech and everything. Like your packages, same day delivery. Have you ever heard of hour delivery like that quick with the goods? And that, but then it raises the question, how much will it cost to the consumer and the client? So, you know, Leah, you talk about, you get it quicker from Long Beach to Beverly Hills, but what if it's 4 times the price?
So I have a stat. I have another stat. The cost is $500 million for the tube to go 30 miles. But it would be a wash because it would replace 300 trucks, which cost $180,000 a year to operate over 10 years.
Yeah.
But that tube can only move 144 containers in 24 hours. And right now, from LA ports, trucks move 11,000 a day.
Say that again, 144 versus 11,000?
Yeah. Well,
okay, forget it.
But that's on one tube. That's on one tube. So the goal isn't to have, we have one tube from point A to point B. The goal would be to then be directing, okay, so we have, you know, 2 or 3 tubes heading up to Northern California. We have a tube heading into Reno. We have a tube heading into Phoenix. You know, we have a tube heading into Texas. So it's you know, the way you can merge set up the different routes. It's not like, we just do one. It's like, no. It's a network. You know?
Yeah. And I think
or you do different staging grounds.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're
say that again, AJ. What'd you say?
You do different staging grounds. So you have like for example, from here to from Port of Long Beach to Beverly Hills. You say, hey, if you want your shipment to be picked up, you go to, you know, this spot and you have 5 trucks there, and then you have 5 trucks in a different spot. And then it helps with the congestion, but again, it's only 144. But maybe it reduces the time that you can say, hey, it's moving 24 hours and it's shuttling, you know, 1,000 containers between Long Beach and Beverly Hills or somewhere in California. Or as Audrey said, you have a few tubes going to Texas. It's a lot easier, and then you help with the congestion. It's just 144 containers. That doesn't seem like a lot, but it is.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is if you think about, again, speaking from the U.S. perspective, the lack of really staying on top of infrastructure. You know, that's an issue. Taxpayers have a lot of other things that we want our dollars to go towards. So people think, well, you patch a pothole, I'm sure it'll be fine for another couple of years, a couple of months at least. So appetite from the government in terms of funding that. And then to your point around why hasn't Amazon done this, that's another interesting issue, because then the question becomes, how much control should private sector have over the public spaces and over goods movement? I think we're already a little bit terrified of Google probably, you know, using all of this data today for their own purposes, you know, and Amazon and some things like that. So you have to think about that balance, and then the cost perspective, and then the appetite to take on that and the industry that'll be impacted by it.
Yeah. A couple of benefits is that it's going to eliminate millions of metric tons of pollution. And I actually did some research on a company called Transpod out of Toronto. And
Okay.
they said that it will move just as fast as air cargo, but be way more affordable.
Yeah.
So could you imagine? You're also going to obviously reduce some pollution in the skies as well, because we might not have to use as much air cargo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's huge. That's huge.
It really is. But it's going to take a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
But it's not as much as high-speed trains, and it's not as much as a new highway, and it's not as, it's when you compare other infrastructure options, it's not as much of an investment up front.
Okay, good point. And if we're going to keep moving stuff by truck, I mean, that's not helping pollution. We already have a driver shortage. So what is that solution? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
We could use inland waterways. I've talked to Pat Roche about that, and he wants to use inland waterways to be able to help move cargo as well. But at the same time, if they're going to be going port to port, you still might need the Hyperloop option as well.
Yeah.
Right? Because that only alleviates from one state to the next. It doesn't alleviate within that state and the trucking that goes on within that state to get it from point A to point B.
I think with the Hyperloop, we'll see it more being used at first in the first stages to move people. Like, I understand that it's going to be moved for goods at first, for safety and everything. But when you tell people you can go from, New York to LA in, a few hours or 30 minutes, everyone's going to jump right on board, and they're not going to worry about the goods at first. So it might just be whoever is listening and wants to invest in the Hyperloop. I wish I won the, lottery and I'd do it. But if you start with the people, everyone's going to start getting on board with, hey, you can also move goods as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's not only going to affect trucking industry. We're now talking about the airline industry, and it's going to affect them as well. So it'll be interesting because you've got two really big industries.
Right, and you got the fuel industry, and you have the mechanics and the drivers, and there's a whole lot.
Like, this is
likely won't be a North American debut.
What?
It likely won't
bet
debut
that.
in North America. They're looking at the first. The first one is already for China, or they're looking at one in UAE, in between Dubai and like Abu Dhabi. So
okay,
yeah.
I can see the Middle East more so, and even China.
Yeah.
But is it done correctly in China? That's the biggest thing, the safety issues, because they don't have, like we have in the U.S.
standards.
And working in China, we went through so much red tape just by paying people off. Which that's how you
need to be careful of. So on that note, we are going to go to another topic. Let's go to another topic. So the next one is general labor, and I'm going to turn this over to Leah because you came up with this topic. Well, why should we talk about this?
Actually, I think it's a lot of what we're just talking about right now has a big impact on labor. And since I work from an economic development standpoint, the question is always, number one, how do you identify what's emerging in the workforce, which I don't think we're really very good at because the technology keeps changing so quickly. Mm-hmm. And certainly from a scalable standpoint in terms of providing mass education around certain types of technologies, that's really difficult. And then, if we're talking about this issue of the Hyperloop replacing jobs and probably in large numbers, then how do you pivot and make that something that addresses this idea of the workforce? And then you can get into all other tangents like universal income and lots of other things. So, I think it's a really critical topic and a really interesting one. And I think with the Hyperloop question, to me, there's an interesting example. Maybe we can kick this off as one option for the discussion. So Governor Newsom here in California is looking at the Central Valley, which is our big ag producer, and then the Inland Empire, which is our big warehousing and distribution, center, if you will, as being two areas of needing economic stimulus. So there's the question around what does that look like? And are we just going to do the same old, same old? And I suspect government in some ways will, because that's just, a solution that we can go to more quickly and readily. But we also got to start looking up ahead. And, Hyperloop to me would make a lot of sense for those two regions just as a place to start. But then how do you translate this idea of technology that takes away jobs and turn it into a conversation around economic growth and employment opportunities?
So I'm gonna just quickly jump in here, because I think that with the loss of jobs is also going to come the opportunity for different positions. And through that discussion, I think that also needs to include talking about, providing the education so that they can take their skills and what they have now and repurpose them into a different opportunity. Because as far as technology, AI, machine learning, I think they're going to take away some of the jobs that are labor intensive, but you're not going to take the creativity and the strategic, the visionary. You can't take that away from humans. And so if we're going to be able to put that together with the skills that they already have and repurpose them into other jobs, I think that's going to be the key. And I don't think that it's just going to be the employer. I think it's the government that's going to have to step in and be somewhat responsible for it, but also the individual. And that's kind of my 2 cents about the losing the jobs and then maybe helping to repurpose, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity that comes out of it as well.
And it's a tough one. So I'll just push back a little bit and go to the example of like the coal miners. Remember during the last, elections, that was a big topic. And Clinton came out and she said, we're going to move into these impoverished communities and we're going to teach people how to build new skill sets and move them into the 21st century. And that's not necessarily an easy lift either. Yeah. I mean, just for a lot of people, that's totally unrealistic. So it'll be interesting to see, do we have a gap where one element of the workforce just doesn't have the skills and are too far removed from using them regularly to advance that forward? Mm-hmm. Is there a way that they build partnerships through the use of AI as sort of an advanced assistant, if you will, that allows them to engage in these technologies? Right. Or is there something totally outside of that? I mean, it's easy to look around the world generally and think there's got to be a lot of jobs. Just cleaning up the ocean alone should employ tons of people. What does that transition look like? I don't think it'll be easy.
No, I don't think it'll be easy either. Audrey?
I think,
or
go ahead.
AJ.
Go ahead, Audrey.
No,
Audrey first. Late. Okay. I think with cleaning up the ocean, no one wants to do it. It's not a fun job. It's kind of like the blue collar jobs. No one wants to be a plumber. No one wants to be a truck driver. But in today's world, those are the jobs that are paying the best. Plumbers make $60 an hour. Mm-hmm. I thought of becoming a truck driver. When I was in supply chain, I'd tell people, my clients, hey, pay me and I'll go get a truck. You're learning something new. And I think everyone should learn a new talent or a new career path. You're never too young to learn something new. And I think it's just our pride of, I have a degree or I have a master's degree and I, shouldn't have to do this. Well, what if I throw in an extra zero or an extra $20,000? Will that make you do it? Mm-hmm. So it's companies saying, what values you the most? Is it a title? Because I know people that are like, oh, this is an entry level job and I'm not getting this title. Oh, okay. You want a title? Sure. Or is it the pay or is it the flexibility? I know we'll talk about working remotely. So that's where I think it's the mindset and just saying, listen, you're not good enough for any job. You're not below any job, but there's some instances where you have to, take a job and it doesn't have to be full, for the rest of your life, but you might end up liking it.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, because I think trades are really going to become super important.
They are.
There's not enough people going into trades, and trades are really those areas where we're not really going to be able to replace it.
And trades are one of those areas where we see the most integration of technology in a way that's really meaningful. I work, for the community college system, which is the broadest entry point for social and economic mobility across the nation. And when we look at the trades, and you're absolutely right, AJ, people make this assumption. I think parents do this to their kids, like, you should be an app developer. Mm-hmm. Yay, just what we need. But the reality is the trades have a huge need. There's a big, what do they call it? The silver tsunami of all of the retirees upcoming. And when you look at the way that trades have to integrate with technology, it's probably the best place to get that foundational knowledge to prepare you for the future of Hyperloop or whatever comes next.
Absolutely.
No, my dad said that, when looking at jobs, I don't care what job you do, as long as you're happy doing it. Mm-hmm. And, people have told me you can either find a job that you don't like and you'll make a lot of money, or you'll find a job that you make little money and you love your job. But find that happy medium, and don't think you're below anything of, I'm working with American Airlines as a gate agent, and I've had friends be like, but you have a degree from university, like, you shouldn't be having to do this. I'm like, right, but I get to work, I get to interact with people, I get to fly for free, I get to do all these things that not a lot of other people get the opportunity to do, and I'm enjoying it.
And you're learning that's the new biggest skills.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So if anyone has any, I learned the biggest thing that I'm excited for that everyone keeps telling me is you're going to have to deal with unruly customers when, flight gets canceled or weather or something. And I'm like, yeah, I remember I did that. I think we all have yelled at it. But that's where you take a step back and you're like, wow, I have a better appreciation. That's where I'm a firm believer everyone should work in the food industry business, being a server or bartender. That's where you really learn people skills and you get so much appreciation for people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Audrey?
Kind of two things to look at. I mean, one, going back to, the displacement, right? It's like, oh, we're going to train you on this new job. And I know you live in, the middle of Pennsylvania, or the middle of Saskatchewan, and we're going to move you out to the middle of the ocean. How do you feel about that? Because people like their communities, or, there's not, there was just a study about for Canada, inter-province moves, and like, there's only like 15% of people in Canada move to a different province in their lifetime. It was a really low number where you're like, oh, I thought more people would have left or moved or something. It's 20%.
Oh, Canada.
Yeah, well, I was going to
what's going on?
I was going to say, in the US, I think you guys move state to state a lot more than we do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But so it's looking at that. Each country has its different kind of thing. But like, if you're hunkered down and happy in Chicago, do you really want to be moving to Jacksonville? Well, Jacksonville's
yes.
No
winters.
You want to get pushed
by
Seattle because that's where your job is. Most people don't want to kind of go through that displacement. And then with regards to service jobs versus other jobs, I mean, I think we do, as parents or as kind of mentors, or as, it's like you push these ideas of this is a great job. If you haven't worked in that job, like, oh, doctor's an amazing job. Doctor to me seems so stressful.
Yeah.
And if you don't like, why is that doctor, accountant, lawyer? Why is that still ooh, that's the job to have, right? Like, I don't think so. It doesn't sound that great. And from a mental health perspective, you see all this burnout in a lot of those jobs. So it's kind of for everyone to step back and lose their kind of prejudice or judgment against all these different kinds of jobs. And the next generation coming up, it's not always putting the zero on it. They want an experience. They want to learn. They want to know that they're giving back. They want, like, each person comes to a job for a different motivation. When they figure out what their motivation is, or when they figure out what their picture of success is, and recognizing that it's completely different from everybody else's. It could be completely different from your parents or your grandparents. And it's taking the time to really get to know yourself. But yeah, plumber might be a great job. It's, it's a good wage. And it's like, you probably have certain times or flexible hours, or it's like, I could be out, if I'm a, big golfer, I could be out on the golf course, and then, I have to go into work for this. So yeah, even looking at it's looking at yourself and not maybe the prejudices or advice of others. Sometimes it's really thinking through a job You know, like if I had to go back and do it again, it's like, would I have chosen this specific job, or, you know, would I have done something completely different, right? Surf instructor, I don't know.
Yeah.
Go live with Leah and be a surf instructor instead of
Come on out.
Oh, wow.
up in Toronto doing like global trade and dealing with tariffs. Which would I choose, knowing what I know now?
Come out, we can carpool together. That's what I need, Audrey.
Well, it's a good point. And I think also another thing to point out here is that employers need to take responsibility so that we cross, what's the word? So we make sure that everybody has a chance to learn from each department.
Oh, yeah.
Because it not only creates empathy, but it also allows people to figure out what they like, what they're good at, you know. And I've often said this to a lot of people, including my stepdaughter, right? My stepdaughter is looking at colleges right now and what she wants to do in college and all this kind of stuff. And I said, listen, it's going to change. You're going to try so many different things to try to figure out what you're good at, what you like to do, how you're going to merge them into a lifestyle that you're going to enjoy, because that's what the next generation is looking for. That it's so important to just keep trying, because you're never going to know unless you try. You're never going to know unless you get into another department. And that's where I think, you know, not only is it the responsibility of the individual to make sure that that happens for themselves, whether inside the company or outside the company, but also the employer to make sure that the people are in the right spots.
I think the employer piece is huge. We do a lot of convening of employers to talk to them about what's happening in the workforce and the skills gaps. And the thing that I think that's really interesting and the hardest to pin down is a lot of employers themselves, particularly in smaller to mid-sized companies, don't even know what they're calling these new job titles. Right. You know, so you're like, who's running your global sales department? Oh, it's just Mario, you know, what's Mario's title? Just sales, you know? And yet when you ask what are Mario's unique skill sets that employers need, it's really quite specific. And the problem is if industry doesn't articulate that in a way that we can all get behind, then education doesn't know how to respond to it. So there's definitely a gap there that I think we're going to have to hopefully resolve sooner than later. It's one of the challenges I deal with all the time.
And job titles have become, like, in the last 10 years, people are just making up their own. I made up my own, but mine makes sense. But you see people like, I'm the chief adventure officer. Okay, well, what skills do I bring to adventure? Like, do I learn my wilderness first aid? What do I do here? Like, so job titles are just like a horrible disaster, and it's usually someone's just personally made it up and it sounds cool. But how does you know, colleges or universities, like, how do I tackle, I'm trying to be the chief adventure officer? Well, actually, you're just like in supply chain or import and export, and there's these lists of skills, and that's what you need. So, you know, the industry can also, by trying to make it fun and interesting, can also kind of set up a little extra hurdle where, you really have to break down people's job descriptions and what they're doing every day. And that doesn't, you know, kind of HR working and collaborating with, you know, I helped pitched in on what my, you know, they didn't tell me what my job description was. It's like I fed them, like, this is what I'm doing every day. This is what I think would be useful. You know, when we hired a coordinator, it was, I think, you know, this may be what the coordinator role would look like. So it's, you know, internal collaboration, and then it's, you know, it's less nonsensical when you're trying to bring in universities and colleges into
that is the key, skills, right? Yeah. Internal collaboration to come up with the skill sets that's needed for the different jobs that you need. I think that it's more important to focus on the skill sets than it is to actually focus on the job title. I mean, how many people do you know in a sales team where they all have like VP of sales or like director of business development because they need the title to be able to get into a customer potentially, right? So again, to your point, like, job titles are not, in my eyes, meaning as much as they used to. And with jobs changing, I mean, jobs are changing, right? You've got roles emerging every single day that we didn't know about 5 years ago, that we didn't even think about 5 years ago. Of course, we don't even know what to call them. But at least if we can focus on the skill sets needed to hire the individual for that particular role, fine. What do you need to put a label on it? Why do we need to put a label?
Well,
I blame millennials. Millennials, we all want recognition. And I think
and I blame the government because from a data standpoint, I got to pull and aggregate data based on not your creative title you gave yourself. I got to have categories that the national database actually has. So that's all I'm saying is if the only data I have say sales, and it doesn't articulate some of the skill sets around, that international component, et cetera. So if I get consensus, though, on these broader categories, then that gets embedded into the data fields, and suddenly I can start to look at how is this shifting the workforce. So
yeah, that's a good point. Well, in my research, so I was looking at, it was kind of neat because I read a report by 3 researchers from Malaysia. And they said, what if I said that sustainability in our organizations will rely on the integration of HR practices and supply chain practices? So bringing HR and supply chain together. And then I went further into it to look at some of the tech trends in human capital. And there's a lot of really amazing technology practices that I think are going to get incorporated by mid-market and enterprise because they're looking to invest in HR management suites or human capital suites. So one of them was internal talent marketplace. So they're matching internal employees, alumni, and contingent workers to short-time projects or work opportunities. Right? And this one's going to go directly into our last topic around, are you hiring an employee versus a contractor or freelancer? Because HR departments are now looking at freelancers as a part of their talent pool, right? They're looking at freelancers as that option. And a lot of millennials and a lot of the next generation after that are also, wanting to be freelancers. They're building themselves up as influencers, and they're able to get, the monetary value that they're looking for. So anyways, just a few other things for the HR suite was virtual assistants, worker engagement platforms, voice of the employee platforms, which I think is going to be cool, machine learning, which is going to be analysis and recommendation to improve processes by identifying trends and patterns. So they're now going to use data within the HR suite to be able to make the process of human capital and finding talent a lot more efficient, and bring the integration between the different departments, which brings me back to the HR versus the integrating with the supply chain practices. But anyways, so those, I just wanted to share those with you because I thought that they were pretty interesting, right? The fact that, I don't know about you, but kind of I'm in that supply chain hole, most of the time, and I'm not really thinking about HR and how that role is evolving and how that industry is evolving and what's happening on the tech side for that. But that to me seems amazing. Like that's really going to engage so many more employees, right? It means that the company and HR are just going to get that much more integrated and give people better careers, I think.
And it breaks it down to what is the work, right?
What is the work? That's right.
What is the work that we're doing? And it's not around the constructs and the 9 to 5. So I'm here for that.
Yeah.
I can't remember who brought it up. I think it was you, Audrey. You brought up the 9 to 5, and as long as your work gets done, you can leave at 4:30. And I think with freelancers, you can work wherever you want. I had the opportunity to, I was in Italy and I got to go to Germany, and people are like, you get to do this with your job? I'm like, well, there's a lot that goes into it. You don't understand. We're up late. We're talking with people. We're doing conference calls. We're sending emails constantly. It doesn't matter where you're at as long as the job gets done. And that's where I think people forget of, it's all glamorous and everything, but as a freelancer, you're working harder than anyone else. And this also goes into working remotely, which I'm sure we'll get into later in another episode. But as long as the work gets done, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Everyone wants, extra vacation. They want to spend time with family if they have family. Or, even now, one thing I want to bring up is some companies are letting employees bring their dogs to work, which I think is absolutely stupid. I think
that's been happening for a long time.
My dog comes to work.
It's employee engagement. People, their dogs socialize, they socialize. It's great.
It works for some industries. And have dogs around cosmetics.
Ain't happening.
I guess, and you also got to be cognizant, I guess, of whether somebody is allergic to it, because
we have someone who's scared of dogs. So.
Scared of dogs, yeah. Like the big dogs I'm scared of. I've got, one that's 13 pounds and 14 pounds. Those are big enough for me. I'm sure you've seen them walking around in the background, actually.
Yes, a little
Let's
bit.
just point that out because I'm not that guy from CNN who's not going to get up and not point that out. But anyways, so we're talking about employees versus freelancers. And I actually posed this question to the community. So I'm going to share some of those answers with you. But first, I'm going to talk about the Forbes article that sort of started this whole thing for me, because they were saying that I think 40% of millennials are now working freelance. And having a gap on your resume is no longer a death to your career.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like that is huge. That is a really big deal. And the fact that HR, HR sections of companies, departments are considering freelancers as a part of the talent pool. We've come a long way, people. Right?
Long way.
Yeah. So, and they're commanding high pay. They get lots of perks, looking at different ways to work with different companies. And you don't have to hire somebody 40 hours a week if you don't need them for 40 hours a week. Why were we doing that to ourselves?
Oh gosh.
Right?
So anyways, I don't know what you guys think about it. Maybe you want to weigh in, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what the community said.
I'm interested to see what the community says. What's everyone?
Okay.
Yeah, let's hear.
All right. So Gwen from Freight Path, he said, this one resonated with me as we have been having a mix of contractors and full-time employees since we started. My answer is that for any key strategic activities of your company, you want dedicated employees. I find oftentimes contractors are delivering average quality results compared to the standards I have for the company. Now, a contractor can be more affordable for punctual jobs and bring skills that will complement your existing team's skill sets. As a freelancer, I'm just going to point out that I don't necessarily agree with what he says, because when I take on a job and I work with a company, you're actually going to get more out of me as a freelancer than you are as an employee, because I need to prove it for myself and my company, and I need to work extra hard to make sure that you're satisfied.
I think it depends on the kind of job, and also like out of 100 people, there's going to be 10 to 15 who aren't going to pull their weight, right?
Good
So
point.
when you look across the board, there's always going to be there's going to be that top 20, there's going to be your mid, and then there's going to be the people who are, whether they're contract or regular employee, they're just not going to pull it. So.
And I guess it depends on what you're paying.
Or what the perks are, what the conditions are, and what the work is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of contractors, and I have had the full spectrum of experience. And I do find it's, challenging, because I'll set up a scope of work at the outset, and then because they're not directly in my office, I don't necessarily oversee the work on a regular basis. So I have to really have a lot of trust in their ability to follow through and produce a final product at the end when we reconvene that's really meaningful. And that doesn't always prove to be the case. So it's a challenge on both sides. Yeah.
Yeah, I had another tech company weigh in, Rich Carlson from Savvy. He said, great topic. We are moving more and more towards outsourced expertise where we need high-level talent but have needs less than 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
So for example, we have an in-house counsel that is part-time, as well as highly talented experts on contract manufacturing, both adding tremendous value, and they get to do other great things for other companies, accelerating their learning and their long-term value to us. Yeah. So I love that standpoint, right? Because he's saying not only do we get to work with you, but you get to work with other companies and help them to build and grow their companies as well.
And that's what I referenced last episode too. And it's something that I always suggest to small to medium enterprises and entrepreneurs who are starting out. It's that they can't know everything. So, it's a really great market for them to hire an expert for, the 8 to 10 hours that they need their legal expertise, or even if they're looking at international trade, finding someone who can help them specifically with exporting or specifically with importing. And it really is a short period of time. It's just kind of to set up the system or pass on some of that knowledge to someone in-house. So it's certainly, it's way more effective than paying someone at a high salary, but you get their expertise, and then the bonus or the benefit to the expert is that they can share their knowledge and work kind of as much as they want to. So if they want to do 2 to 4 hours with your company and then 10 to 12 with someone else, they can kind of have a bit more control over their time.
Yes, and they're helping to build multiple businesses.
Yeah.
Like that is a collaborative mindset, right?
For sure.
Come over here and help us.
Yeah.
And then go over there and help them, because there's enough out here for everybody.
And but it also works for, like, I have such a short attention span, so I would find that fun, being like, I'm at this company, I'm at that company, I'm bouncing around, I'm getting a coffee on my way. It might not be for everyone. There might be people who really like to have their kind of more consistent behavior, but yeah, there's certainly people out there who would love that kind of option.
What about you, AJ, as a young professional in supply chain? What do you think between employee versus freelancer?
I think I have friends that do both, and the main concern is the benefits. As a freelancer, you don't get the benefits. You have to find your own benefits. And for me, that's something that's very important. If you were to offer me a job, I'm like, yeah, you get the benefits. Like, okay, perfect. That's great. Even though I'm making a little less than as a freelancer. For me, I like interacting with people face to face. Not saying I don't enjoy conference calls or phone calls, if that's all you can do. But if you had to pick between someone that you hired that, you've interviewed and HR has gone through, and then you have a freelancer where, Fiverr is a great example. Hey, I need this project, and you worked with them, and you built a relationship with them, it's perfect. Whereas, just someone randomly is like, yeah, maybe I'll try him out. And then if it doesn't work, you're scrambling to find someone else, to find a new person. That's where it's good and bad. I like who in the community had like a mix where you had some freelancers and some staff.
Yeah.
So that way you're able to, kind of divide the work and let everyone know, hey, yeah, this works, this doesn't, per se.
Well, and I think it also depends on where you are in your career.
Yes.
So if you have a significant other that's getting the benefits, and you don't necessarily need the benefits, you might have the flexibility to be able to go out and be a freelancer. Or if you've had kids, right? Depending on how you want to get back into the workforce. Or mid-career, you've worked at that director level, you've worked at that C-suite level potentially, and you don't really want to do corporate anymore, but maybe you want to help build a startup. You're starting to think about your legacy and what does that legacy look like? And you want to give back to the community in some different ways, right? Mm-hmm. So I also think personally, depending on employee versus contractor, now you have the flexibility of figuring it out at different times of your career.
Yeah.
And if the biggest pain point is something like insurance, then, it would be great if either insurance companies adjusted, good luck with that. But if then there was an organization, and I don't know that much about Fiverr, but if that's what they do, it's like, if you can have a pool of freelancers who then are buying into things that you require a pool of people to do. So there's kind of a niche there too, for a company to come along and be that, we'll be the hub to help you all get insurance. And I don't know. Mm-hmm. Not much about it, because I have free healthcare, so I don't have to think
sorry. There's cuts coming. There are cuts coming, apparently. I heard that today.
You can get insurance through different ways, but a lot of companies, they have great health benefits. And I know people, they won't leave their job.
Yeah, because of the gym or
Well, the gym or the health benefits are, they're paying for my braces or all this. I'm like, okay, braces at 45, not bad. But still, it just, that's what drives a lot of people.
We are just putting it all out there on this episode. This is what you can expect to see from us from now on.
Oh God.
I think AJ should be a regular panelist on this discussion.
Well, thank you. I like to bring some fun to the end of it.
All right, so I am going to wind this down. And I just want to ask each of you one last question, because I had fun with this in the community last week. And I asked, how do you explain supply chain to your family? Audrey?
It starts where I try to use terminology like, oh, I'll give them my title, logistics and customs specialist, which helps no one.
No.
And then I'll be like import export. And then I'll break it down to international trade and break it down further. I move boxes around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually where it ends up. I move a bunch of boxes around the world. I sometimes get free cosmetics. It's interesting.
Leah?
I think, I maybe explained it as how the stuff you buy probably online gets to you eventually. That's something everyone seems to wrap their head around.
Yeah. AJ?
If anyone asks me, and we're in the house and like, you see that spatula? How do you think it was made? And then how do you think it got from where it was made to here right now? Is it, was it on a train? Was it on a truck? Was it on a plane? And then how did it get through? And that's how I tell people, and even my family, that's what supply chain is. It's making everything seem easy to you, where to us, it's a complete nightmare. It is. Which it is. You have to get the right documents. You have to get the right, bookings. What if the ship fall,
Yeah.
So something. How do you deal with that? And then how do you get it from the port to, the warehouse, and then how the distribution and everything. It's easy to everyone else, but to us, it's a nightmare, but it's also fun. It's kind of a game.
So many moving parts, right?
So
I've stopped explaining it, and I just tell people I'm a podcaster. Anyways, so I want to thank everybody for joining us on the second episode of the Trade Squad. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as we have. Thank you, AJ, for joining us as our special guest today and weighing in with some really insightful comments. And to Leah and Audrey, as always, such a pleasure. And until next time.
Next time.
Thank you.